Dear learners, warm greetings once again. I welcome you to a new session. This is on review of literature. In the last 3 weeks, we have gone through in detail on research methodology and the features of research, qualitative and quantitative researches in detail. But this week we will be studying about how to conduct the review of literature and how you can use different tools while doing review of literature. So, let me present you the content of this particular unit. So, in the beginning we will be discussing upon the basics of review of literature and the sources of literature, slowly advancing to conducting review of literature and different types of review of literature, and finally at the end of this particular week you would be in a condition to better understand review of literature is conducted during the time of research. This module covers what is review of literature, why it is important, and doing a literature review, the process, the beginning part that we will be studying. I recommend you few books and a research paper which will be helpful for you to have a better insight on conducting review of literature. The most popular and accepted literature source is by Chris Hart, who extensively wrote on conducting review of literature. The two other books which I recommended here, Bob Matthews and Creswell. Basically these books are dealing with research methodology, but the chapter of review of literature are quite useful. I often used the references of these books while I made these lectures. The last one, Booth and Bailey, this is a research paper. While you go through this research paper, you will get a better idea about the importance of literature review in dissertation preparations. So, what is a review of literature? This is a quite used term in research circle. So, while a researcher enrolls, the supervisor or the guide advises the student to refer books or available research materials. Why such advices are made? After going through the books, dissertations or research publications, the scholar can get a better idea about what is going on in the current research scenario or the specific context. So, this helps researchers to have an understanding on what is happening in that particular area of work. Review of literature is mandatory for all kind of research work, whether it is a dissertation or a research paper. It involves background reading, that is a generic reading about what is going on, and a detailed search of information, then in-depth reading and evaluation process, and finally structuring it in an appropriate way so that you can use it in your dissertation. This is recommended by Matthews and Ross in their book Research Methods, a Practical Guide for Social Sciences. So, what is meant by this particular slide? So, before you enter into the research, you should have a wide reading about the area that you are planning to work. So, a number of magazines or maybe PhD thesis or research publications which come across while you are sitting in library or referring through the sources, which you note down important points. So, these all fragmented information finally can direct you to a specific point and where your real literature review starts. Let us see the definition of literature review. It refers to the selection of available documents on a particular topic that contain information, idea, data or evidence that gives you a background to go ahead with your research plan, that supports your research agenda, and how it is going to give you a way or how it is going to give you a direction to your research. This definition is provided by Chris Hart. So, let us see the three different aspects of review. The first one is distinguish, and the second one is identifying important variables or identifying important developments, and third one is gaining new perspective. So, what is done already and what is going on currently and what is to be done in the future. So, these three different areas which we can get insight while we are doing literature review. In the early days of my education, I was not knowing much about literature review. So, what we do is we collect the data and we do the basic analysis, and in the dissertation we normally avoid or we do not go into the details of literature review. But my teachers advised me to refer some books and research publications as part of the dissertation process. Being a teacher right now, I understand why my teachers advise me to refer books or refer thesis or go through the relevant literature before I proceed with my dissertation in my graduation days. So, this helps us to understand, as I said, what have been done and the importance of the topic, a particular topic, what is it all about. So, the researcher can gain insight on the theory as well as conceptual understanding of a particular area. Then from here we can think about the analytical framework and strategies. Then we can also compare and contrast the similarities and differences. We can come out with a specific terminology for our research or the common language used in a particular area of interest. So, it helps the researcher to design specific research questions. In a nutshell, literature review is very important for a researcher, whether you are a scholar or even if you are a student. According to Creswell, a literature review should meet three criteria. The first one is present the result of similar findings, and second one is relate the present study with the ongoing discussions, and the third is it should provide a framework for comparing the results of the study with other studies. So, let me explain you in brief. Imagine you are conducting a study. So, first is you have to gather the information from the available sources. So, that information should be relating to what you are discussing in your research, and the contemporary issues, the current issues should be highlighted and it should be mentioned in your research if it is related. At the end, when you get the result, you have to compare the result with the findings of other researchers so that it could be validated. Now, I have mentioned here the process of doing a literature review. Let us go one by one. First is, let us start with the topic origin, the etymology or the words which are commonly used in the area of your work. And the second part is the key information sources that you are searching. So, we know Shodh Ganga or say different journals, libraries are the sources of this information. Next, how is the knowledge in this field is structured, means what kind of studies are going on. I told you earlier about quantitative studies, qualitative and mixed research methods. So, while you read, you will get a better understanding about what kind of researches happened in your area before, and it will speak about the concepts and theories, widely popular theories and concepts that you can get from literature review. You can also find out the frameworks and models. So, the ontological grounds about the reality, how researchers came to an understanding after conducting their study. So, these insights we can get from literature review. So, dear learners, when we do literature review, remember you start with identifying common terms, and the terminology have to be defined, and while you are doing literature review, it would be the first task for you, and then use the depositories, that research materials available, whether it is in the form of thesis or in the form of research journals. Check the sources, that includes library or online sources. And the next important point is to find out theories. So, the theories which are applicable in your area, and then comes the models or frameworks, and finally the findings of researchers, the findings which would be applicable in your area or not. So, that these all things we can get insight while we do literature review. So, let us go through this slide. I have divided the information in 3 different columns. The first one is where the information is generated, or the source of information. We can find individuals, charity organization or NGOs, governments and public private institutions, trade associations or pressure group. They bring out different publications. These publications give you insight on the developments or evaluations or the progress happening in an area. And the second format is anthologies, conference papers, blogs or journal publications, newsletters, reports, textbooks and thesis. What is the difference between the first and the second one? In the first one, the published information available in the domain of, say, online or maybe printed format, where individuals or organizations, they bring out their studies or their researches on specific area. And when you look at the second column, this goes into more specific, and the last form of information is, this is abstract, catalogs, directories, indexes or encyclopedia, which are little ahead. These forms of information are highly used among researchers. So, there is 3 different forms where we can find information. These are all contributing to knowledge, but for a researcher is concerned, we often look into encyclopedia so that we can get the term and definitions, appropriate definitions, directories or catalogs, so that we understand, in an area what kind of progress is happening in terms of research. Or while you are going through abstracts and indexed abstracts especially, you will have a more clear insight on the progress of research in a particular area. Let us have a quick review of literature sources. We will be discussing it in detail in the next module. So, we have books and rough read journals, to newspapers or literature called grey literature, or you say research reports or internet. These all are the sources of information for your literature review. And how we should use it, which source is appropriate, and when and where we can use this all I will explain in the forthcoming module. Dear learners, what we search in literature? Let us have a quick understanding of what is searched in research literature. So, one is topic. For every research scholar, finalizing the topic is a challenge. So, to have a topic, you have to identify an area, and you should also know what kind of researches have already done in an area. Number 2, the purpose of your study. The purpose of your research, or if you want to set your objectives, again a literature review helps you out. Why and how? While you are going through the publications or research literature, it will give you an idea about different studies and what were the objectives of the other or previous researchers. Now, it will give you a concrete idea to set your objectives. Number 3 is finalizing your research questions. So, literature review is very important to finalize your research questions. Number 4, method. So, what appropriate method shall be useful and how it can be used in your research. So, this would help you. So, literature review will help you to finalize your method. The existing researches will give you idea about the evidences or the empirical outcomes of the existing researches, so that comparing the findings will give you a complete idea. It will give you a holistic idea about the literature present at this point of time. Finally, the last point is the research highlights, so that as a researcher you can understand what kind of advancements are taking place in a particular area of interest. So, being a researcher, there would be several questions coming in your mind. I made this point looking at the perspective of a research scholar. So, a research scholar always look into the content of an article, research article, and compare whether that fulfills the requirement of the scholar. Number 2, that area is relevant or not. Number 3, whether that article or the research provide relevant literature sources, methods or findings. And next point is whether this research addresses the questions that the researcher is looking at, and can we accept the evidence, because this is also a question. Then the conclusions drawn by other researchers, whether that helps me to set my research goal. So, this particular slide which deals with the general notions of a research scholar, what they look in a research article. I hope you would be clear about what you are searching in a literature. Once again I repeat, the content that matches with your requirement. What are the content here? It means the methodology discussed, the findings and the outcomes. These areas a research scholar go through in a research article. So, how do the review of literature serve the research? One is identifying relationships, second one is establishing context, third one is rationale, the fourth one is understanding the structure of the subject, the fifth point is main methodologies and research techniques used, and the last point is familiarizing yourself with the latest techniques. So, the point number 1 says about relationships of variables basically, and if we are thinking about qualitative research, we already know context is important. So, for you, establishing the research context can be done while you are going through other literatures, and you can justify why this particular study is important. So, establishing the rationale is possible, and the subject matter, how it is presented in different researches, this also will help a researcher to conduct his or her study. Methodologies and techniques, this will help you to justify this particular methodology that you adopted is already used or recognized by some researchers. So, to conclude, literature review is a very important part of any research. A research scholar spends lot of time in library searching books, thesis or other research materials. So, to have a precise understanding of literature review, it is important to gain insight of what you are looking for. This particular module was prepared with the perspective of a research scholar, what content should be looked at. In this lecture, we have seen we should have clarity on the terminology, the words that we are using, and we should also have the clarity on the operational definitions and the methods that we are following or the frameworks, concept and theories. A detailed review of literature helps the researcher to identify the research problems easily, and it also helps the researcher to set the research questions and the models or frameworks. It will give a clarity, or the researcher will have confidence when it is substantiating with a previously proven research technique. So, I hope you understood about what we discussed in this module. For the emerging researchers, there are several tools which are helpful in doing literature review. We will be discussing such tools in the coming lectures. So, if you have any doubts, please come back to me. Thank you.